Good morrow, scholars. My nose still itches. Welcome back to Shiver. I fed the turtles and I remembered to read the next chapter. I'm going to feed Iggy after this one. Give him a chance to wake up and not try and bite me. Anyway, so the last chapter, or the last video, was a pretty depressing one. But it ended on a hopeful note. That says a lot about your book when a hopeful note is infecting people with meningitis. Also, be mindful of West Nile virus and whatnot if you live in an area affected by it. I'm kind of worried because when I'm at work I have to go outside to get pallets and I get bitten by a mosquito here and there. And yeah, anyway. We are on chapter 58, Grace, 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Being in Beck's basement made me both the happiest and the saddest I'd felt since Sam had changed into a wolf, because seeing Beck there, in his own world, was like seeing Sam again. It started when we left Olivia puking in the bathroom and met Beck at the top of the basement stairs. It was too cold for him to meet us at the front door, and I realized that Sam had inherited so many of his mannerisms and movements from Beck. Even the simplest gestures, reaching over to brush up a light switch, inclining his head for us to follow him, awkwardly ducking to avoid a low beam at the bottom of the stairs. So much like Sam that it hurt. When we reached the bottom of the stairs, I caught my breath. The large main room of the basement was filled with books. Not just a few. It was a library. The walls were lined with recessed shelves that climbed to the top of the low ceiling, and they were stuffed full. Even without getting close to the shelves, I could see that they were categorized. Tall, fat atlases and encyclopedias on one shelf. Short, colorful paperbacks with rumpled edges on several others. Big photo books with block letters on their spines. Hardcover novels with glistening dust jackets. Sorry, I'm kind of zoning out. I'm remembering a moment from my childhood. It's never a good thing. A cat just went into the bathroom. I stepped slowly into the middle of the room and stood on the dusky orange carpet, turning slowly to see them all. And the smell of Sam was everywhere in this room, like he was here with me, holding my hand, looking at all these books with me, waiting for me to say, "I love it." I was about to break the silence by saying something like, "I can see where Sam got his reading habit," when Beck said, almost apologetically, "When you spend a lot of time inside, you do a lot of reading." I remembered then, abruptly, what Sam had told me about Beck. This was his last year as a human. He would never read these books again. My words were stolen from me when I just looked at Beck and managed, stupidly, "I love books." He smiled, like he knew. Then he looked at Isabel, who was craning her neck as if Jack must be stuffed in one of the shelves. "Jack's probably in the other room, playing video games," Beck said. Isabel followed Beck's gaze to the doorway. "Will he tear my throat out if I go in there?" Beck shrugged. "No more than usual, I'd think. That's the warmest room in the house, and I think he feels more comfortable in there. Though he still changes every so often. Just pay attention." It was interesting how he talked about Jack, more animal than human, as if he were advising Isabel on how to approach the gorillas at the zoo. Almost said at school. That would be weird. I remember this one time in elementary school. I was really sick and I couldn't go, and it was the day that they had brought a whole bunch of exotic animals to the school for the students to learn about. And I hated my life. Anyway. Where was I? After Isabel vanished into the other room, Beck gestured toward one of the two squashy red chairs in the room. "Have a seat." I was glad to settle down into one of the chairs. It smelled of Beck and a few other wolves, but mostly of Sam. It was so easy to imagine him down here, curled in this spot, reading and developing an obnoxiously large vocabulary. I rested my head against the side of the chair to pretend I was curled in Sam's arms, and turned to look at Beck, who sat down in the chair opposite. Not properly, but crashed back into it with his legs kicked out. He looked tired. I'm sort of surprised Sam kept you a secret all this time. Are you? He shrugged. I guess I shouldn't be. I didn't tell him about my wife. He knew. He told me about her. Beck laughed, short and fond. I shouldn't be surprised about that either. Keeping a secret from Sam was impossible. Not to be cliché, but he could read people like a book. We were both referring to him in past tense, like he was dead. Do you think I'll ever see him again? His face was far away, unreadable. I think this year was his last. I really do. I know it's mine. I don't know why he got so few years. That's just not normal. I mean, it varies, but I was bitten a little over 20 years ago. 20? Beck nodded. In Canada. I was 28, a rising star at my firm, and I was hiking on vacation. What about the rest of them? Where are they from? From all over. When I heard that there were wolves in Minnesota, I thought there was a good chance they could be like me, so I went looking, found out I was right, and Paul took me under his wing. Paul's the black wolf. He nodded. Do you want coffee? I could murder for coffee, if you don't mind the expression. Just make sure it's Jack. I miss Chloe. Where was I? I was intensely grateful. That would be wonderful. If you point me in the direction of the pot, I'll make it. He pointed it out, hidden in a cranny between the shelves, next to a tiny refrigerator. And you can keep talking. He sounded humored. What about? The pack. What's it like, being wolf? Being a wolf, sorry, I don't know. Sam. Why you changed Sam? I paused, coffee filter in hand. Yes, that one. I want to know that one in particular. Beck crumpled his face in his hand. Heavens. The worst one. I changed Sam because I was a selfish B-word without a soul. I measured coffee grounds. I heard the regret in his voice, but I wasn't letting him off the hook. That's not a reason. Deep sigh. I know. Jen, my wife, had just died. She was a terminal cancer patient when we met, so I knew it was going to happen. But I was young and stupid and thought maybe a miracle would happen and we'd live happily ever after. Anyway, no miracle. I was depressed. I thought about killing myself. But the funny thing about having wolf in you is that suicide doesn't seem like a very good idea. Did you ever notice that animals don't kill themselves on purpose? I'm gonna point out that that's not really true. I mean, there's a difference, I guess, between older animals that are about to die, going off to die, and away, like, just to be solitary. I guess to basically bury themselves. But if I forget where it is, I think it's in England. There's this bridge, and dogs come from all over to the bridge, and they jump off. And they fall to their deaths. And if somehow they survive, they work their way back up and they jump again. Nobody knows why. Anyway. I hadn't. I made a note of it. Anyway, I was in Duluth in the summer, and I saw Sam with his parents. Ugh, this sounds awful, doesn't it? But it wasn't like that. Jen and I talked all the time about having kids, even though we both knew it would never happen. Heck, she was only supposed to live for another 8 months. How could she have a baby? Anyway, I saw Sam. There he was with his yellow eyes, just like a real wolf, and I was totally obsessed with the idea. And you don't have to tell me, Grace. I know this was wrong, but I saw him with his silly, vapid parents, them just as clueless as a pair of pigeons, and I thought, I could be better for him. I could teach him more. I didn't say anything, and Beck leaned his forehead into his hand again. His voice was centuries old, and I didn't say anything, but he groaned. I know, Grace, I know, but you know the stupid thing? I actually like who I am. I mean, not at first. It was a curse, but it came to be like someone who loves summer and winter. Does that make sense? I knew that eventually I'd lose myself. But I came to terms with that a long time ago. I thought Sam would get over it too. I found the mugs in a little cubby above the coffee maker and pulled 2 of them out. But he didn't. Milk? A little, not too much. He sighed. It's terrible for him. I made a personal hell for him. He needs that sort of self-awareness to feel alive, and when he loses that and becomes a wolf, it's hell. He is absolutely the best person I've ever met in the world, and I absolutely ruined him. I have regretted it every day for years. He might have deserved it, but I couldn't let him get any lower. I brought him a mug and set it back down. He loves you, Beck. He may hate being a wolf, but he loves you. And I have to tell you, it's killing me to sit here with you, because everything about you reminds me of him. If you admire him, it's because you made him who he is. Beck looked strangely vulnerable then, his hands wrapped around the coffee mug, looking at me through the steam above it. He was silent for a long moment, and then he said, The regret will be one of the things I'll be glad to lose. I frowned at him, sipped the coffee. Will you forget everything? You don't forget anything, you just see it differently, through a wolf's brain. Some things become completely unimportant when you're a wolf. Other things are emotions wolves just don't feel. We lose those, but the most important things, we can hold on to those. Most of us. Like love. I thought of Sam watching me before we had met as humans, and me watching back, falling in love, as impossible as it should have been. My gut squeezed horribly, and for a moment I couldn't speak. You were bitten, Beck said. I'd heard this before, this question, without a question mark. I nodded. A little more than 6 years ago. But you never changed. I related the story of getting locked in the car, and then explained the theory of a possible cure Isabel and I developed. Beck sat quietly for a long moment, rubbing a small circle in the side of his mug with one of his fingers, staring blankly at the books on the wall. Finally, he nodded. It might work. I could see how it might work, but I think you'd have to be human when you got infected for it to work. That's what Sam said. He thought if you were killing the wolf, you shouldn't be a wolf when you were infected. Beck's eyes were still unfocused as he thought. But it's risky. You couldn't treat the meningitis until after you were sure the fever had killed the wolf. Bacterial meningitis has an incredible fatality rate, even if you catch it early and treat it from the beginning. Sam told me he'd risk dying for the cure. Do you think he meant it? Absolutely, Beck said without hesitation, but he's a wolf, and likely to stay that way for the rest of his life. I dropped my eyes to my half-empty mug, noticing the way the liquid changed color just at the very edges of the rim. I was thinking we could bring him to the clinic just to see if he'd change in the heat of the building. There was a pause, but I didn't look up to see what expression Beck wore during it. He said gently, Grace. I swallowed, still looking at the coffee. I know. I've watched wolves for 20-odd years. It's predictable. We get to the end, and it's the end. I felt like a stubborn child. But he changed this year when he shouldn't have, right? When he was shot. He made himself human. Beck took a long drink of coffee. I heard his fingers tapping the side of the mug. And to save you, he made himself a human to save you. I don't know how he did it, or why, but he did. I always thought it must have had something to do with adrenaline, tricking the body into thinking it was warm. I know he's tried to do it other times, but he never managed it. I closed my eyes and let myself imagine Sam carrying me. I could almost see it, smell it, feel it. Jeez. Beck didn't say anything else for a long time. Then again, it's what he would want. He'd want to try. He drained his coffee. I'll help you. What were you thinking? Drugging him for the trip? I had been thinking about it. In fact, ever since Isabel had called. I think we'll have to, right? He won't stand it otherwise. Benadryl. I'm sorry. Oh my gosh. If any of you are familiar with George Lopez, he's one of my favorite comedians. I love his shows. Anyway, he had a joke in one of his stand-up specials. I forget which one it was by now. I've watched them all so many times. It's just all... Sorry. They all kind of blend together. Anyway, he did a joke about how Mexican parents, when they want to go out, they'll give their kids Benadryl to make them go to sleep. Call it good night juice. And it just, that made me think about it, and just, I don't know. I've got some upstairs. It'll make him groggy and put him out enough, or put him enough out of it that he won't go crazy in the car. I wonder if that would work on Artemis. He doesn't like car rides, really. And he's a pretty big dog, too. Anyway, where was I? The only thing I couldn't work out was how to get him here. I haven't seen him since the accident. I was cautious with my words. I couldn't let myself get hopeful. I just couldn't. Beck's voice was certain. I can do it. I'll get him. I'll make him come. We'll put the Benadryl in some hamburger or something. He stood up and took my coffee mug from me. I like you, Grace. I wish Sam could have had. He stopped, put his hand on my shoulder. His voice was so kind I thought I would cry. It might work, Grace. It might work. I could see that he didn't believe, but I saw too that he wanted to. For right now, that was enough. Let's see, how long is this one? One more. Chapter 59, Grace. 38 degrees Fahrenheit. A thin layer of snow dusted the ground as Beck walked into the backyard. His shoulders dark and square underneath his sweater. Inside, Isabel and Olivia stood with me by the glass door, ready to help, but I felt like I was alone, watching Beck slowly walk out into his last day as a human. One of his hands held a glob of red, raw meat laced with Benadryl, and the other shook uncontrollably. A dozen yards from the house, Beck halted, dropped the meat to the ground, and then walked several paces toward the woods. For a moment he stood there, his head cocked in a way that I recognized, listening. "What is he doing?" Isabel demanded, but I didn't answer. Beck cupped his hand around his mouth, and even inside, I could hear him clearly. I don't know. "Sam!" he shouted it again. "Sam, I know you're out here. Sam, remember who you are." Is anyone else thinking about The Lion King? Sam. Shaking. I don't know. Beck kept shouting Sam's name to the empty, frigid woods until he stumbled and caught himself just before falling. Uh-oh. I pressed my fingers to my lips as tears ran down my cheeks. Beck shouted Sam's name one more time, and then his shoulders hunched up, buckling and twisting, his scrambling hands and feet scarring the layer of snow around him. His clothing hung on him, vast and tangled, and then he backed out of it, shaking his head. The gray wolf stood in the middle of the yard, looking toward the glass doors, his eyes watching us, watching him. He stepped away from the clothing he would never wear again, and then he froze, turning his head toward the woods. From between the dark black pines, another wolf emerged, head low and cautious. Snow dusted over his ruff. His eyes found me, behind the glass. Sam. That's sad. That's sad. That's really sad. Well, that's okay. I didn't want to be happy today anyway. Okay, so that's going to be it for this one, because I'm tired. And honestly, I want to get ready and I need to go hunt more Pokemon and gather more Pokeballs and stuff. How'd it go?
Very well.
Okay, good. I don't know if we have the sequel to this or not, so there's that. If we do, I will let you know when we can start reading it. And I think once I'm done here, I'll start that book over there that I mentioned. Anyway, let me know if you have any ideas for a book to read that you would like to see me read or listen to. If you would be interested in me and Miga when we try and do, I guess the podcast idea for explaining, it turns out it wasn't Civil War, it was Secret Wars, the new one, the recent one in Marvel, using a Pokemon playthrough to explain it. Anyway, just let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear from you. I have a few comments that I need to reply to. I'll probably wait till tomorrow when I have more time. Anyway, until next time, goodbye everybody, and have a good day. I lost the charger. Oh, and I lost the connection for this one. I don't know what's wrong with me.